There's something most people overlook when they talk about success. They talk about goals. They talk about hustle. They talk about time management and habits and discipline. All of that matters. But none of it will get you very far if you don't start with one simple, overlooked question: why am I doing this at all? Every morning we wake up with a choice. We can let the day happen to us, or we can decide what the day is going to mean to us. That begins with purpose. That begins with asking a powerful question that too few people ask themselves: why does today matter? When you know your why, you're dangerous, not to others, but to your own doubts, to your own excuses, to the inertia that keeps you stuck in place. You're no longer just reacting to your calendar, your to-do list, or your inbox. You're leading your day instead of following it. Now, I'm not talking about some huge cosmic purpose that takes years to define. I'm talking about something simple, practical, immediate. Today's why. What is the reason I'm waking up and choosing to care today? Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I worked with a leader who was wildly successful on paper. Title, salary, accolades, you name it. But every morning he'd hit the snooze button. Not once, 3 times, sometimes 5. And when he'd finally crawl out of bed, there'd be this look in his eyes. Tired, yes, but also empty. Eventually he broke down. He told me, I don't even know why I'm doing any of this anymore. He had lost connection to his why. His work had become a series of tasks, meetings, and deadlines. Nothing rooted, nothing inspiring. He wasn't lazy, he was aimless. That's what a lack of purpose does. It makes effort feel pointless. So we went back to basics. I asked him, what's the impact you want to have today? It was the only thing I asked. Not next year, not next quarter, just today. It took time, but soon he started waking up with a different mindset. He'd begin his morning not with email or social media, but with intention. He'd write down a sentence: today I will lead by example. Or today I will encourage someone who's struggling. Or today I will do something that makes my team stronger. Small, specific, powerful. That's the key. See, your why isn't always going to be some grand mission. Sometimes your why is showing up fully for the meeting you'd rather skip because the person across the table needs your energy. Sometimes your why is being a little more patient with your kids because you want them to grow up feeling seen and loved. Sometimes your why is putting your head down and doing the hard work because it brings you one step closer to who you want to become. Without that purpose, our days blur together. They become transactional. We do things out of obligation, not out of meaning. And when that happens over time, we burn out. Not because we're doing too much, but because what we're doing lacks connection. Think about this. Most people spend more time planning their weekend than they do planning their purpose. They prepare presentations, meetings, and meals, but they don't prepare their mindset. And so their days become reactive. They let the world set the tone, and the world is chaotic, noisy, and constantly pulling us in 10 different directions. But what happens when you start your day with a clear, grounded reason? Suddenly, the little things don't knock you off course so easily. You stop chasing every notification. You stop worrying so much about what other people think. You have a filter, a way to decide what matters and what doesn't. That's what a why gives you clarity. Here's a simple practice I challenge you to try. Tomorrow morning, before you pick up your phone, before you check your email, before you let the world pour into your mind, take 60 seconds. Sit quietly. Ask yourself, what kind of impact do I want to have today? Write it down. Say it out loud. Hold it in your mind. It doesn't have to be profound. It just has to be honest. It might be, today I will stay calm when things go wrong. It might be, today I will give someone hope. It might be, today I will learn something new. That's your win. That's your reason to show up. That's your why. I've met people who thought they were burned out from working too much. But when they reconnected with their purpose, when they started leading each day with intention, something shifted. They weren't tired anymore. They were energized. Not because their workload changed, but because they changed. You don't need to change your entire life overnight. You don't need to quit your job or move to a new city. You just need to ask better questions. Questions like, why does this matter to me? Who benefits when I show up fully today? What's the deeper reason behind my routine? When we lead with why, we remember that what we do is not just what we do, it's who we are becoming. Every day becomes a brick in the foundation of the life we're building. And when that foundation is strong, when it's built on purpose, we can weather anything. Challenges don't blarify us. So the next time you wake up feeling tired, overwhelmed, or unmotivated, don't reach for coffee. Don't reach for distraction. Reach for meaning. Start with why. Anchor your day in purpose. And watch how everything else, your attitude, your energy, your results, begins to shift. Because when you know why the day matters, you show up like it does. There's something incredibly powerful about the promises we make. We remember the ones we've made to our teams. We remember the ones we've made to our friends, our families, our partners. We hate letting other people down. But what we don't talk about enough is how often we let ourselves down. Quietly, privately, consistently. Think about it. You say you'll wake up early and go for that run. You say you'll start that project this week. You say you'll stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. But when no one's around to notice, it's so easy to push that promise to the side. You justify it. You tell yourself, it's not a big deal, I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes never. And slowly, subtly, you start believing that what you say doesn't matter. But here's the truth. If you can't trust yourself, you'll always struggle to lead others. You'll always feel like an imposter. You'll always be chasing something externally to compensate for what's broken internally. That's why keeping promises to yourself is not about discipline, it's about identity. Every time you follow through on something you told yourself you would do, you're voting for the person you want to become. You're proving to yourself, not anyone else, that your word has weight, that you can rely on you, that you're not waiting to be saved, validated, or motivated. You're in control. And no, it's not always easy, but it's worth it. I once worked with a young entrepreneur, brilliant mind, endless ideas, charming presence. On the outside, people thought he had it all together, but behind the scenes, he was stuck. His business was stalling, his confidence was cracking, and he didn't know why. We sat down and had a raw conversation. I asked him, what's the one promise you keep breaking to yourself? He looked down, took a breath, and said, I keep telling myself I'll finish what I start, but I never do. That moment changed everything. Because once he admitted it, we had something to work with. We didn't start with a productivity tool. We didn't build a new schedule. We started with integrity. He picked one small promise to keep every day, just one. And that small daily win rebuilt his self-respect, brick by brick. People often think they need motivation to take action. But it's actually the other way around. Action builds confidence, repetition builds belief, and belief fuels purpose. Motivation isn't what starts the engine, commitment is. And that commitment must start with you. There's a common trap in leadership. We show up for everyone except ourselves. We run around solving problems, managing fires, meeting deadlines, being available, being helpful, being everything for everyone. But inside, we're exhausted, depleted, running on fumes. You can't pour from an empty cup. And you can't lead others from a place of self-neglect. If you constantly abandon your own needs, your own boundaries, your own promises, you are teaching people that your word is flexible, that you don't matter as much. And over time, you'll start to believe that too. Keeping promises to yourself doesn't mean becoming selfish. It means becoming stable, grounded, trustworthy. Because the moment you start honoring your own word, your energy shifts. You walk into a room differently. You speak differently. You make decisions differently. Not from ego, but from alignment. And alignment is where the magic happens. Let me give you something simple. Tomorrow morning, before the world gets noisy, write down one promise you'll keep today. Just one. It could be, I will drink enough water, or I will be fully present with my kids, or I will spend 20 minutes reading instead of scrolling. Small, clear, actionable. The kind of promise you can keep even when the day gets chaotic. Then do it, no matter what. Follow through. And at night, take a moment to acknowledge yourself for doing what you said you would. That's how you build a pattern. That's how you build trust. Not with big declarations, but with small, invisible victories. The world may never clap for those wins, but your character will. And your character is what people actually follow. We think people are drawn to charisma, but what people are really drawn to, what they trust, is consistency. The kind of consistency that begins when a person has done the hard work of keeping promises to themselves, when their internal world is aligned with their external actions. That's when influence becomes real. That's when leadership becomes meaningful. Because at the end of the day, it's not what you achieve that defines your strength, it's what you uphold. And the first promise worth upholding is your own. Imagine this. If you went 30 days without breaking a single promise to yourself, no matter how small, how would that change you? What would happen to your confidence, your clarity, your energy? What would happen to the way others experience you? You don't need more information. You don't need another hack or app or routine. You need integrity, quiet, personal, inner integrity. The kind that isn't seen by others, but is felt by you. You already know what needs to happen. You've known it for a while. The only question is, will you honor it today? When you keep promises to yourself, you're not just winning the day. You're building a life you trust. That's how you lead. That's how you grow. That's how you win. Every single day, we live in a world that celebrates the highlight reel. Everyone wants the big moment, the applause, the breakthrough, the outcome. Social media has made it worse. Everywhere you look, someone's showing off their peak, their biggest achievement, their grand announcement, their moment of glory. But what no one posts, what no one talks about, are the quiet, boring repetitions that got them there. We've been conditioned to expect success to feel exciting, like we're supposed to wake up every day fired up, motivated, and overflowing with passion. But that's not how greatness works. Greatness isn't loud, it isn't glamorous. It's built in silence. It's built in the dark. It's built when no one's watching. If you look at any person who's consistently winning, not just occasionally, but predictably. You'll find a rhythm behind their results, not a rush. A rhythm, something they do daily, even when they don't feel like it, especially when they don't feel like it. They've learned to fall in love with the process, not just the prize. That's what I mean by embracing the boring reps. Because let's be honest, most of the things that lead to mastery feel incredibly unremarkable. Practicing the same move again and again. Having the same conversation with your team until it sticks. Waking up early to do the same journaling, the same reading, the same workout. It's not thrilling. It's not new. It's boring. And that's why most people won't do it. But boring isn't bad. Boring is where the work happens. Boring is where confidence is built. Boring is where identity is forged. Think about athletes. The best in the world don't just practice when the stadium is full. They train when it's just them, their coach, and the sound of their own breath. And they repeat the same drills, the same plays, until they're automatic, until they become muscle memory. So that when the big moment comes, they don't rise to the occasion. They fall back on their preparation. I once worked with a team leader who couldn't understand why their results were so inconsistent. One month they were hitting targets, the next month they were completely off track. The talent was there, the passion was there, but the process was missing. So I asked her, "What do your boring reps look like?" She looked confused. "What do you mean?" I said, "What are the small things you do every single day, no matter what, that make the big results inevitable?" She thought about it and admitted, "Honestly, I don't have those. I just work really hard when the pressure is on." That's the problem. Most people wait for pressure to perform. But true professionals don't rely on pressure. They rely on process. We built her a routine, a simple set of habits she'd repeat daily. Check-ins, debriefs, reflection, planning, nothing flashy, nothing groundbreaking, just boring, repeatable excellence. And in a few months, her team's performance transformed. Not because they got smarter or more talented, but because they got consistent. Consistency is a superpower, and boring reps are the path to consistency. The reason most people struggle isn't because they're lazy or unmotivated. It's because they're addicted to novelty. They chase the next thing, the shiny thing, the exciting thing. And the moment something feels too routine, too repetitive, they lose interest. They want change, but they don't want repetition. And that's a problem, because growth lives in repetition. You don't get strong by lifting a weight once. You don't get smart by reading a book once. You don't get trustworthy by telling the truth once. You become those things by doing the boring reps over and over and over again. Here's what's funny. When people see someone crushing it, they always ask, "What's your secret?" But usually there is no secret, just systems, just habits, just effort that's been repeated so often it becomes who they are. Boring reps are the bridge between who you are and who you want to be. They're the small choices no one sees that eventually lead to the results everyone wants. I know it's not sexy. It's not supposed to be. That's the point. You do the reps not because they feel good, but because they do good, because they compound, because they quietly stack up into something powerful over time. And yes, you're going to want to quit. You're going to feel like it's not working. You're going to think, this can't be it. There has to be something more exciting, more advanced, more interesting. But that voice is lying. That voice is impatient. That voice doesn't understand how mastery works. Mastery is boring. Progress is boring. Winning is boring until it isn't. Until one day you wake up and you're further than you've ever been. And people ask how you did it. And you smile because you know the truth. You did it by doing the work when it was dull, when it was quiet, when it was just you showing up with no reward, no applause, and no proof yet. The people who win aren't the most excited. They're the most consistent. They're the ones who kept going when it stopped being fun. They're the ones who embraced boredom and made it their edge. So the next time you feel stuck, don't look for a breakthrough. Look for your reps. Ask yourself, what's the boring thing I've been avoiding, and then do it. Not once, every day. Because discipline isn't doing hard things. Discipline is doing simple things repeatedly, even when they're no longer interesting. That's how champions are made. That's how trust is built. That's how you create a life that wins every day, not just in moments, but in momentum. Fall in love with the boring reps. They'll take you further than motivation ever could. Most people think leadership is about being in charge, about being the loudest voice in the room, the person with the answers, the title, the authority. But real leadership isn't about taking control. It's about taking care. It's about putting others first, not because you have to, but because you choose to. Leading with service, not ego, is one of the most misunderstood principles in the world. We live in a culture that rewards visibility. If you look successful, if you sound important, if you seem confident, you're praised. But ego, when it drives leadership, always leaves damage behind, because ego leads us to ask the wrong question, how can I win? Service leads us to ask the right one, how can I help? There's a fundamental shift that happens when you stop trying to impress people and start trying to impact them. When you stop focusing on being the best in the room and instead focus on bringing out the best in others. That's the shift that separates managers from mentors, bosses from builders, leaders from legends. I remember speaking with a seasoned executive, highly respected, but when you walked into his office, there was no ego, no grand desk, no flexing of titles, no inflated presence. What struck me most was how he listened, fully, attentively, not waiting to speak, not waiting to be right, just present. Afterward, I asked him what his secret was. He smiled and said, "I'm not here to be the smartest person in the room. I'm here to make everyone else smarter." That's what service looks like in leadership. It's humility in action. And humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's showing up not for recognition, but for contribution. It's knowing that the most valuable person in the room might not be the one talking the most, but the one helping others speak up. Ego will always tell you to protect your image. Service tells you to protect the people. Ego says, don't show weakness. Service says, be honest. Ego builds walls. Service builds trust. And the difference becomes very clear over time because one creates fear and the other creates loyalty. I once worked with a young team leader who had just stepped into a management role. She was driven, articulate, brilliant, but something was off. Her team wasn't responding. There was tension, burnout, resistance. She was frustrated. "Why won't they just do what I ask?" she said. I told her, because they don't feel seen. They don't feel safe. She was leading from a place of pressure, of performance, of ego, not because she was arrogant, but because she thought she had to prove herself. That's what ego does. It turns leadership into a performance, not a relationship. So I asked her to try something different. I said, tomorrow, instead of checking what your team has done, ask how they're doing. Show up for them before you expect something from them. A few weeks later, things changed, not overnight, but gradually. Her team started communicating more. They started taking more initiative. There was laughter in the room again. Not because her strategy changed, but because her presence did. When people feel seen, they show up differently. When they feel safe, they take risks. When they feel supported, they stretch further. That's the power of leading with service. You don't have to be in a formal leadership role to live this. Leading with service can happen in every part of your life. In your family, your friendships, your work, your community. It happens when you choose to listen instead of interrupt. When you choose to mentor instead of compete. When you choose to build bridges instead of building your brand. Service asks more of us than ego ever will. Because it's not flashy. It doesn't always get credit. But it's the only kind of leadership that lasts. Because it's not built on attention. It's built on trust. We all know someone whose presence makes us feel like we matter. That person who makes space for others, who uplifts, who leads not with dominance but with dignity. That's the kind of leadership the world is starving for. And it doesn't take much. It starts with asking, what does this person need right now? How can I contribute to their growth? What can I do today that serves someone beyond myself? Those questions will change the way you lead. They will also change the way people respond to you. Because service is magnetic. When you lead with empathy, with integrity, with care, people feel it. And they don't just follow you, they believe in you, they show up not out of obligation, but out of respect. Ego seeks to be followed. Service seeks to walk with people. Ego needs to be right. Service wants to get it right. Ego demands compliance. Service earns commitment. This is not about being soft. This is about being strong in a way that lifts others. Leadership rooted in service isn't passive, it's powerful, because it builds cultures where people want to belong. Teams that last, relationships that matter, results that are sustainable. And the beautiful irony is this: when you lead with service, you do win. Maybe not in the traditional sense. Maybe not in a way that fills headlines. But you win in the only way that counts. In the loyalty of people, in the trust you build, in the lives you elevate. So the next time you feel that tug to prove something, pause. Ask instead, who can I help right now? Who needs to be seen? What does service look like in this moment? Lead with Ed with care. Lead with the mindset that your success will be measured not just by what you achieve, but by what you build in others. Because when you lead with service, the results follow. But more importantly, people follow, not because they have to, but because they want to. And that's how you win, quietly, powerfully, every day. We live in a world that's always rushing toward the next thing. Finish one task and another replaces it. End one day, and the next morning is already screaming for your attention. In the middle of all this motion, there's one habit that quietly separates those who grow from those who simply repeat. It's not something flashy. It's not productivity software. It's not waking up at 5 a.m. It's reflection. We don't grow from experience. We grow from reflecting on experience. And yet, for most people, the day ends when their energy runs out. They collapse into bed, phone in hand, brain overstimulated, heart unsettled, mind racing through unfinished to-do lists. Then they repeat over and over. But the ones who win, who truly evolve, who show up wiser, more grounded, more focused the next day, they do one simple thing that changes everything. They take a few minutes to ask, what did I learn today? That's it. That's the shift. Not what did I do or how much did I accomplish, but what did I learn? What did this day teach me? Because every day offers us something, a lesson, a pattern, a moment of truth. But if we don't slow down long enough to capture it, we lose it. And what gets lost in silence eventually repeats in chaos. I remember working with someone who was chronically overwhelmed, brilliant, driven, talented, but she was always tired, always buried under the weight of her own ambition. She was doing a lot, but gaining very little. Her work was loud, but her growth was quiet. So I asked her one question: do you ever pause at the end of the day and ask what it all meant? She paused. No, she said, I just try to survive it. That's where most of us are, surviving our days instead of learning from them. But your day isn't just a set of tasks, it's a teacher. And when you slow down to reflect, you allow the day to shape you, not just exhaust you. Some of the most grounded leaders I know have a ritual. It's not complicated. At the end of each day, before bed, they sit quietly and ask themselves 3 things. What did I learn today? Who did I impact today? What am I grateful for today? That's it. Simple questions. But the power is in the consistency. Because over time, those questions build self-awareness. They sharpen your emotional intelligence. They show you not just what you're doing, but who you're becoming. And that's the real purpose of reflection, not to evaluate your performance, but to reconnect with your purpose. I had a mentor who once told me, never let a day end without capturing its wisdom. He didn't mean journaling for an hour. He meant making meaning out of what might otherwise pass unnoticed. A conversation that revealed something. A mistake that taught something. A win that reminded you of your values. When you reflect, you transform routine into revelation. But here's the thing. Reflection requires honesty. It's not about perfection. It's not about proving you had a productive day. It's about being real with yourself. Owning what went well and what didn't, not for the sake of judgment, but for the sake of direction. There's no growth without awareness, and there's no awareness without pause. The world tells you to hustle, to push harder, to do more. But growth doesn't happen when you're always moving. It happens when you create space, when you breathe, when you sit quietly and say, okay, what is life trying to teach me right now? It's easy to dismiss this practice as soft, but the truth is reflection is a form of leadership, because when you reflect, you learn. When you learn, you adjust. And when you adjust, you lead better in your work, your relationships, and your life. If you don't reflect, you risk repeating. You keep making the same decisions, chasing the same goals, falling into the same traps. Not because you're not smart, but because you're not pausing. You're not giving yourself the chance to extract the lesson. And those lessons compound. A small realization today becomes a better decision tomorrow. A moment of gratitude tonight becomes a better conversation next week. This is how wisdom is built, not through age or experience alone, but through intentional reflection. You don't need an hour. You don't need to write a book every night. You just need 5 minutes. 5 quiet minutes to ask yourself, what mattered today? Where did I show up fully? Where did I hold back? What will I carry forward? And what will I leave behind? These questions create alignment. They reconnect you with your values. They remind you that your time is finite and your days are not to be wasted. They help you sleep better. Because instead of going to bed with noise, you go to bed with meaning. The most successful people I've met aren't the ones who do the most. They're the ones who learn the fastest. And reflection accelerates learning. You can't change what you won't face. And you won't face it until you slow down and ask. That's why reflecting before you rest isn't just a productivity hack. It's a leadership principle. It's how you build a life of depth, not just noise. And here's the part no one tells you. Over time, those 5 minutes of reflection become your story. They become the wisdom you pass on. They become the clarity others feel in your presence. They become the reason people trust you, not because you have all the answers, but because you've wrestled with your questions. So before you reach for your phone, before you scroll into distraction, before you collapse into exhaustion, pause, sit with yourself, ask what the day gave you, ask what it took from you, ask who you became in the process, reflect before you rest, because how you end your day shapes how you start the next one. And the people who win every day aren't the ones who did the most, they're the ones who learned the most. And learning only happens when you choose to listen, even to yourself.